Go.
I just gave her Liz. Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Give it to Betty. Gretchen, this is for Betty. It's not for you.
Oh, darn.
Okay? So, good evening, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We're going to try to, Mr. Andrews has informed me that the Broncos kick off tonight, and he'd like to at least watch part of the game. You know, so I don't. Well, I'm blaming you, buddy.
You want to borrow my earbud?
You know, to be able. Yeah. So we'll go through a lot of stuff. So can we, Liz? Can we introductions? We need to do introductions really quick. So sorry. Yeah, come on, Liz. Ándale, niña.
Well, shall we start here?
Let's start with Gretchen. Let's be different.
Gretchen, introduce yourself.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Gretchen Hollera, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Good evening, Brad Dodson, Deputy Director for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Albus Brick, City Council Representative for this fine and incredible area. And I need to stand up for this. I'm a proud CU Buffalo.
Whoa! The throwdown. Throw, that's right. Do you have equal time, Jocelyn?
And I live in this area, I live in the Swansea area, and been here for a long, long time. Good my home.
Oh.
John Selfian in Globeville.
Jeremy Rowland, Family Environmental.
Vernon Hill, JJJ Properties.
Mickey Zeppelin, Zeppelin Development, and Globeville and Rhino.
Kayla Birdsong with the Grow House.
Dale Litsky, Globeville.
Liz Adams, CRL Associates. I need to stand up for this. Jocelyn Hill, Colorado State University. Proud to be a CSU Ram. You know I'm usually all about collaboration, but this week,
Not so much.
What was the score last week?
we're not out of our system.
Armando Payana. I went to university, and my heart's at the University of Colorado Boulder, but my allegiance is CSU. Tina supports CSU also.
Tina Martinez, Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Grew up with CU. My daughter's at CSU, so I'm out of this.
Mi nombre es Juan Veloz, represento Elyria y Swansea.
My name is Juan Veloz and I represent Elyria and Swansea.
My name is Ann Elizabeth. I don't like football because I was a better linebacker than all the guys in high school. They would not let me play.
Ann Hayes with Westfield. My alliance is with CU. Sorry.
Paul Andrews, CEO of the National Western Stock Show.
And a proud Wyoming cowboy.
Cowboy, I got no dog in this one.
Hi, I'm Marisa Volpe, and I'm with History Colorado.
I'm Matt Gasiak, I'm with Stoke.
Maxine Chikao.
Karen Akandakar with the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. Melanie Ambrose with the Authority Board. Hello, I'm Autumn Rubal with JLL.
Hello, Eric Anderson with the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Hi, I'm Julie Steen. I'm with CIG. I'm part of the placemaking team.
Jay Rinkins with MIG, also part of the placemaking team. Tyler Kellogg and Brent Pittman.
Paul Engel with Amoresco.
Ty Miller with Amoresco.
Matt Salmon with Kiewit.
Caroline Bicchio with 5280 Magazine. I'm Mary Claire Fisher with 5280 as well.
I'm Zach Doherty. I just live in the neighborhood and went to see you. Sean Doherty with Focus Points.
I'm really good friends with Dad.
Yay!
Anybody else?
Well, you guys will introduce yourselves.
Vern, did you just find that out? Vern, did you just find that out?
Marcy Locker with the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Oh, no, that's on tape, sorry.
My name is Brad Ruggles. I'm just a resident here in Swansea. Right there.
We don't just have residents. Residents are very important, not just.
Come on, put on the front row.
You're especially a resident.
Okay, I think the rest of the folks are...
Okay, so we've done that. So we have a special presentation tonight from Lance and Michael. So you guys want to introduce yourselves and go up front?
I'm going to have you guys use this.
Hi, my name is Michael Hess. I'm the president of the Denver Police Museum, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to come in today to share with you some of the ideas that we have. We are in the process now. We've purchased some land over at 4700 Brighton Boulevard. That used to be the post office and the ambulance place, and there's a couple of houses there. Leo Brandstetter is who we purchased the land from, and Lance is with me. He's going to be speaking as well. He's leading up our development efforts. The reason I'm involved in this is my father was a Denver police officer from 1957 to 1983, so I'm involved in this as a way to say thank you to him. He passed away several years ago, and you know, when you're young, you don't necessarily appreciate your parents so much, and I recognize everything he did for my brother and I, so it's been a great opportunity to meet some of his friends, etc. Lance is also very involved. Lance's father was killed in the line of duty in 1971 when he was 10. He and his brother, who was 8 at the time, suffered a lot as a family, and they've come back hugely successful and very enthusiastic about what we're doing. So we are a nonprofit. We've been in existence for about 10 years. Over the last few years, our mission has strengthened and modified significantly. As we all know in this room, we have issues throughout this country between the police and the community, and it's absolutely essential for the long-term success of our society that that bridge be overcome and crossed. And so when we say the word museum, sometimes that brings into people's mind dusty old artifacts and old uniforms and things like that, and certainly that is a part of what we're doing. But ultimately, I anticipate what this will be called is the Blue Experience. And a major focus of what we're trying to do is be an outside community resource for the department, something of which no other city in the United States, not New York, Los Angeles, any of them are doing anything similar to what we're doing. So, as you can imagine, with experiences like that, people want interactive opportunities. So we're going to have motorcycle simulators, helicopter simulators. You'll come in and you'll play a witness or a detective in some of them and see what the clues are, those kind of things. Many of you may not know our crime lab is actually the most sophisticated crime lab in the world. And it has solved more cold cases than any other city in the world, and more than most nations. So it's very advanced. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to have competitions between Thomas Jefferson and John F. Kennedy High School with the science departments to do some CSI science type stuff. And again, what our mission is going to be is trying to encourage young people to look at a career in law enforcement and get to know some of the officers and that type of stuff. Because we all know here as well that it's not going to get any easier to be a police officer. And overall, Denver's done pretty well through the years with our officers, but again, our expectation level and what our society wants from those officers, it's going to be essential that we identify people with the right temperament, etc. One of the other things that is important about this is it's not going to be a monument to the department. The department has had problems, mistakes, the burglary scandals, and things like that. We're going to candidly cover those things because it's very important that young people understand that organizations get off track and that you have a responsibility to stand up and do the right thing. So we'll have, like I said, things for all generations. We've got a record of the murders that have occurred in Denver. We're going to do like a murder mystery where you'll come in and actually we'll recreate an actual murder that occurred in Denver in the alley, and you'll come in as the police and go to the DA and make your case. So again, whatever we can do to facilitate that interaction. When my dad started on the force, he used to walk the beat down on Larimer Street. And so people got to know him. But in today's day and age, you know, with technology, you know, unless you're a victim of a crime or a suspect in a crime, your interaction with the police is very limited. And so I want to thank you guys for what you're doing down here. This has provided us a great opportunity. The enthusiasm for our project has risen 5 or 10-fold after we were able to acquire the land down here. And we're very anxious to work with you all to be a good neighbor and to facilitate this type of stuff. And again, what excites me is there's no other city in the nation that's trying to do this. We've got strong support from the mayor. A couple of the council members actually donate to us. We also have over half of the active officers now who actually contribute monthly to this, anywhere between $5 and $50. So we're getting the buy-in from the officers, etc. And we've begun a very active community outreach effort. So again, we wanted to come in today just to share with you very briefly what we're doing. I know Lance wanted to say something, but I would be happy to entertain your questions if you have it.
Question, just a comment. Since your facility
Can you guys pass the, Armando, we need to have you pass the mic. Hold on.
And we also, I do have the architectural drawings. We could pass those around so you can get a sense of what we're looking at. Yes?
Again, since, you know, obviously it's a museum here, but I would like to see your equestrian program where the police officers that ride and patrol have a bigger role here since it's naturally located across the street from the National Western, and have the kids in the neighborhood, specifically, explicitly the two elementary schools, get to be more involved. You could integrate that, and with our colleague here with the museums, to integrate that and just enhance the academic quality of both these schools. I think that would be great.
Oh, and there have been a couple of officers who've lost their lives down in this area. And we've been putting up signs where the officers throughout Denver, you'll see them down in Lodo, etc. So we'll be anxious to work with you guys. We've done the history and that type of stuff to educate people. Some of the young kids, some of the Denver public school kids actually pay for the signs now. So, but that's right, I love that idea. And again, the horses and the dogs and those kind of things, so that they get that exposure again to the police and can again build that relationship. It's hard when you meet somebody as a human being to hate them. Sometimes it's easier to hate a group. But when you get to meet the person individually and you learn who they are and what they're about, it makes a big difference. So, Lance, did you? I also want to thank Paul. Paul actually came to when we announced where our opening was, he came out and gave some remarks, etc. And you'll see that's the architectural drawing that we're planning right there. That's night version and day. It's that facility. There's about 30,000 square feet, and the actual quarry where they built the city and county building out of, that stone, is still open. So our plan is to actually build the stone for the museum. It's the same stone that built the city and county building.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Lance Nading, University of Colorado Boulder. And
say that again. We couldn't hear you.
University of Colorado Boulder. Anyway, so yeah, my father was a Denver policeman. When Chief Seaton showed up on our front door at 6:20 a.m. on October 3rd, 1971, we knew it wasn't to have breakfast. Yeah, he would, and we knew he wasn't injured either. I don't know what it is like today, but when the chief shows up at your house unannounced, your loved one's dead. It's just that simple. So I spent the rest of my life very close to the department, obviously. The one thing that I there's many things, but one of the things my father, I think, would comment on today is he was very close to his community. He was a District 2 police officer, and he was very, very close to his community. Truly, he was. And I think he would be sorely disappointed in the lack of connectivity, really nationally. It's not the only, Denver's not the only problem city. But nationally, the lack of real meaningful connectivity between the cops on the street and the community. And I think we could all agree, love, hate, or somewhere in between on how you feel about policemen, connectivity is good, communication is good. So if we've done our job in the next 4 or 5 years when this thing is actually 100% open and going, if we've done our job. It will be an attraction. It'll be an attraction that people want to go to, they want to take their children to, and they have a ton of fun. And truly, the Blue Experience will have more in common, I believe, with what Orlando provides in the way of entertainment versus what you see at the, at a dusty old museum. So anyway, thanks for having us. This is Chuck Crow, by the way. He's our Director of Development. He's working with us to help raise, it's a pretty sizable raise of money that we're going to have to do over the next 18 months, and we're optimistic we can do it. So thanks again for having us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
And we left you a coin on your space from the museum. We do those every year. We give those to the officers and people that contribute. I don't know that it'll get you out of a ticket, but it's worth a shot. So it didn't help for me, Mr. Zapier.
John.
Just something real quick, and then first of all, there are people here that have known Fred Peck, whose family, there's an ambulance. I would just ask for a little bit of a historic memorialization be done, and you guys, it sounds like you've already thought of that, of something. And then for those that know Leo, I just want to say, having had a few conversations with him over the last couple of years, he wanted this, and he could have done some other stuff with that building. He did not sell out. He sold in to our neighborhoods. And if you see him, we didn't get a chance to thank him appropriately, but would you convey that? There's a lot of people that are really very just thrilled that he's done this.
We're going to put both those guys' names on the cornerstone.
Okay. And then one quick thing programmatically.
Yes.
I don't usually get proud being associated with things because it's not my nature. But I was really proud to be associated with the National Western Stock Show here a couple of years ago when they collaborated with law enforcement to shut down some sex trafficking that occurred simultaneous with the events. And I would really like to see a section of your content showing the collaboration between the different protect and serves and these sorts of things in a way that shows how that really works in the larger sense in the neighborhoods and to our benefit.
And we plan to do some special exhibits, like during the stock show, some Western law enforcement things and that kind of stuff. So it really provides us, again, what you guys are doing has really provided us a great opportunity and energy. So I appreciate it.
Yes, I wasn't going to say anything, but then when Chief Seaton's name was mentioned, it brought back a lot of memories, some really bad. Those years through the 60s and 70s were pretty nasty. The racial divisions were at its height. The crusade for justice was very active at that point. And it's unfortunate, but those things did happen. And hopefully, they'll stay in the past. I had some really strong feelings about the Denver Police Department, and I'm sure that they had some pretty strong feelings about me as well. But time has a way of healing things. If this would have happened 50 years ago, some of these incidents may have not occurred. So I wholeheartedly welcome you into our neighborhoods, and hopefully that it will do a lot of bridge building with the youngsters coming up. And I support Armando's mention of the mounted patrol, but only if you have a burro involved in the end.
Well, and I will say the old adage that history repeats itself. If we don't inform people about what's happened, there is always that danger. So again, and as I mentioned on this thing, it's not, we're going to tell the story honestly. I mean, there are ups and downs, and it's important, like I said, for young people to understand that. But there's so many new people in our community that don't have any idea about some of the things you were saying. Even the fact that, for example, we have a 1957, there was a plane that took off from Stapleton, the United Airlines plane, and blew up over Longmont, I believe it was, killed everybody aboard. It was the first act of domestic terrorism with an aircraft, and it occurred here, and we have parts of the plane. And it was not a federal crime at the time because nobody had ever done it. So there are things like that about our history where Denver was really in the forefront. That was before they checked the baggage, so that's what brought that about. So.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to NWC partner updates. CSU.
Sure thing. So just one thing I want to point out, we have a pretty lengthy list of updates there on your agenda for you all to enjoy. But one thing I did want to just mention is that we are actively considering a youth action coalition that would be a way for young people in the Global Elyria Swansea neighborhoods to engage in collaboration with other organizations that already have those kinds of programs. We don't want to recreate the wheel. And we were thinking that maybe there would be an opportunity for some of those youth to engage with the CAC. We wanted to just plant that seed and then table it for another CAC meeting where we actually set aside some agenda time to talk about it. So we don't need to talk about that now, but I just wanted to mention it so that you can think about it and let us know how you think those students engaging with this group would work the best and what you would like to see out of it. And then we'll work with Maria and Liz to set aside some time on a future agenda to talk about it in more depth.
Okay.
We have just a couple of events coming up at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We have a free night, so this is a new thing for us. We usually do the free days, but we'll be open Monday, September 12th from 4 until 10 p.m. And so just encouraging people to come out. It's a fun night. We do face painting and activities for all ages and families. And then we have an educators night coming up, and the details are in here, but please share. That's educators in the broadest sense of the term, anyone who wants to come learn about all of the SCFD organizations that are available throughout the metro area for youth programming.
Thank you. As many of you guys probably have heard, we have an exhibit at History Colorado now called Play Ball, and it's there through the baseball season this year. And cheer on the Rockies because we get to keep the exhibit up as long as they're playing, and we all know they're right on the cusp of going to the playoffs, so we want to keep that exhibit going as long as we can. But so that you guys can come by and enjoy the exhibit, I've got some tickets for you guys to get into the museum for free, so you can check that out. We know it'll be there at least through September 30th, maybe longer, so I'm going to pass that information around.
Thank you. Yep, Mr. Andrews.
Yes, I think our two updates are the only thing I have to report. We have hired the Wells Partnership for the Legacy Building as our construction management firm, and they will be excellent. They're a local firm, and the capital campaign's going well. We just surpassed $25 million raised and are heading to $100 million. So all good there.
Any questions of any of the partners? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to John. Liliana is not here tonight because she's teaching a class. They're back in school, so she had to rearrange some schedule issues. So John, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Monique, he's going to do this other stuff first.
He's going to do what?
The stuff first.
Okay.
No, you. Yes, go.
You want her or me?
No, you.
Okay. All right.
Go.
The confusion is ending. The authority has some good news. Most of you already heard about it, but the finalist and the selection for the executive director, CEO, executive, whatever you call him, Brad Buchanan. And as I told Mr. Buchanan this morning when we met with him, that he certainly has a lot of support, and he is very well aware, and I made him a little more aware of the fact that he's going to have some detractors. And at this point, I think the most important thing for our group here is to look at his being the finalist with open mind and what's best for the National Western Center and ultimately what's best for the neighborhoods, Global Elyria and Swansea, and what is best in promoting whatever self-interest brings you to this gathering. And I've long been advocating and espousing the self-interest and mutual interest that we share. So what I would ask you to consider is meeting with Mr. Buchanan, so that not to dress him down, but have an open dialogue and to get some honest and straightforward responses from him, and for you to clear any misconceptions or whatever concerns you may have. I spoke with him this morning, and I mentioned the fact that some people, especially in the neighborhoods, feel that he is certainly one of the, or at least his policies, is one of the causative factors of the impacts of gentrification and the impact that it has on the minority communities. He certainly is aware of that. I mean, the man is highly qualified, highly professional, and highly respected in most of the areas that he's been involved with and in. And I would add that he's also respected by some of the people that don't think highly of him. So I would ask that you consider having a dialogue with him and airing whatever concerns you might have. Armando?
Yeah, John, you spoke about...
Armando, hold on.
Yeah, you spoke about his background, his professional background. I'm sure his academic background. I'm sure he's, Monique, you feel free to answer as well. But I'm a little baffled here. According to the profile, what we were looking at is somebody with a strong entertainment background. Entertainment, not to bring concert to that, but to bring the National Western Center on a global front. Can you expand how Brad Buchanan plans on doing that, based on your knowledge that you've been able to conceptualize from you being involved in the executive committee appointed by the mayor?
I'd be more than glad to. One of the instances that he's involved in, being a rancher, and Paul, you may know more about this than I do, is his involvement in the production of beef and the distribution of that. Do you want to speak anything to that?
Well, continue on, and I'll be happy to comment.
Okay. He, like I say, he's an architect at Urban Design Group. Also, as I said, he's a rancher, the Flying Bee Bar Ranch out in Strasburg. And while doing that, he had the task of Executive Director of Community Planning and Development for the City and County of Denver. So, what, you want to be more specific about your concern?
Yeah, tell me exactly how his role fits into the role of entertainment. I mean, the bottom line here is the National Western here is about ticket sales and generating enthusiasm all over the world to come to the National Western Stock Show Center.
Address that. I mean, I know Brad from John Prosser was the dean of the UCD, and Brad was one of his students. So I know that, I get that part. That part's easy, but we're talking about a world venue here. What qualities and attributes does he bring to the table that's going to be able to, so Paul can smile at the end of the day, looking at the calendar 365 days of the year?
Well, the impression that I got and the reasons that my position was affirmative was that we need to get this damn thing built. That's number one. And you are talking about 3 to 5 years in the future. We need an individual that understands how to get things done, how to get things built, and the intricacies of the in and outs in a relationship of working with the city and the other members. I totally agree with you that is our goal. But before we get to that level, we need to get this facility built so that it's operational to address those concerns that you just mentioned. You have something to add to that?
Yes, Armando, and everybody in the room, nobody had everything. None of the candidates had every single thing that we were looking for. We had to balance where we are today and what we need against really the long-term future. John's right. Right now, we're looking at how do we get this off the ground? How do we work with a very diverse community? I was really impressed with Brad talking about how the work he's done in the last few years at the city. He has gotten 54 different agencies to all work together and talk to each other. That meant a lot for the community process that we're going to have here. And right now, the other thing that we really felt like we needed was someone who has visionary leadership, and Brad did have that.
And I'd agree with all those things, Armando, and I 100% agree with you. Brad would be the first one to tell you if he was in here, he has no entertainment experience.
He said that today.
Absolutely not. But we have looked at a structure with him where we're going to have a CEO and a COO. But that COO hire can happen down the road because we don't have venues to book, and we won't have venues to book until 2023. So you start booking those venues 2 to 3 years out, so potentially you need an entertainment machine, COO to support Brad for sure. But again, to Monique and John's point, we didn't have any one candidate that had everything, and I think Brad is as close to the perfect candidate as we found.
I want to add that there were some other excellent applicants, and every corporation, every business is always looking for that perfect match to that need. We've sat together for several years here, and I'm going to use that term again, that thin line. Well, that thin line hopefully will be narrowed to hopefully non-existence. But we need to get moving on this thing, and he was the person that appealed to every member on the authority as to the individual that was capable and able to get this thing started. So that's where we are, and I'm here. Liliana's not here, but she's also available. Monique, I'll take whatever criticism you want to send my way. That's part of my being here. It won't be the first time, and I expect it won't be the last. But we are now ready to go to work with this process ending. So I said we've got 14 days, a minimum of 14 days.
John, I was just going to ask you to do that. Can you please explain what the process is so everybody understands the comment period? Because you guys did not hire somebody today.
No, he's not hired. He is the finalist.
The finalist,
yes.
But there is a comment. So can you guys at least walk through that so everybody understands what the public dialogue needs to be?
Brad, you have more experience in that, could you?
I think you're doing a great job.
Okay. We have a minimum of 14 days. I haven't been complimented. Oh, yeah, thanks, Brad. We have a minimum of 14 days to make public announcement, and what we want to do is not limit it to 14 days. We want to extend that as much as you think is necessary without going past Labor Day. No, seriously. I need your input. We want to set some public forums up. The first step would be a dialogue with our group here, and we want to have some visits out into the neighborhoods, different venues, wherever you think people would benefit from having a verbal and visual exchange with Brad. So I'll be asking you for some assistance in setting that up. AE is going to be part of the help on doing that. So we're in the process now of securing some locations, times, and hopefully you'll put your back to the wheel and help us get this thing really rolling. Any other questions or comments?
AE.
John, I want to be clear that my interest in helping set up the venues is to really get direct exchange with our sustainable institutions. The first thing that I proposed was that we engage the schools and that that the National Western Center Citizens Advisory Committee step up as the sponsor of the conversations. It's time for the National Western Center to assert its brand and its leadership. And so I think it would be fantastic if we could have National Western Center sponsored open conversations with Brad Buchanan at Swansea and Garden Place Academy, and that our board members and our Citizens Advisory Committee members participate, and that it be frameworked with some kind of presentation of people being oriented to this in the framework of the conversation, be oriented in the framework of what the National Western Center is. And that and that truly this group now has the opportunity to, right now here tonight, say to John and to Liliana and to everybody that wants to work on this, let's get this on the list. Let's do things right. Let's make sure there's some morning sessions, some afternoon sessions, some evening sessions, some weekend sessions. Let's figure out ways that we can get people here. Let's figure out ways to make sure that we help the neighborhoods understand this is a very significant step to buy in to the vision of the National Western Center by understanding what a CEO does, which I feel we now need to start describing more specifically as part of this conversation. So we have a real opportunity, and I do want to say that I was at the board authority this morning and and I guess I could say bushwhacked Brad a little bit afterwards. And I have known Brad in conversation over a few years, always really challenging him relative to major issues of communications, sensitivities, things of the nature that are very critical in this situation. I have known him to be responsive, and I was real upfront with him too that I think that there are going to be concerns. Mine partly have to do with the where is the constant vigilance toward the content of this project that is the visionary content of economics, education, agriculture, preservation of culture, the weave of the project within the neighborhoods, and where is that inspirational leadership from in every step of the way. Even though I do agree he knows how to bring parts of the build process together in a way that is very critical. So I just want to say that, and all these questions, Armando, your question, wherever Armando is, has to be asked and rigorously answered. All of these questions are very important, and his basic statement was that he knows he has to win the trust and confidence of the people that are the stakeholders. We are the people that brought this project forward. Aside from all the hardworking people and the electorate and the people that are supporting this economy and the agriculture industry and the stock show for staying here 100 years. And so this is a legacy project. It's not just another project, and we need these forums to draw out that relationship. So I'm hoping we really get the turnout and that we really get rigorous questions, and I hope people will look over. Part of my role, I feel, as a CAC, and I would ask all of us to feel this way, is to help people coming into the forum understanding what's been going on with this project. Please help people. There's a master plan at the Valdez Prairie Library. The framework agreement is there. We've got all these great PowerPoints up online. If we can help more of the constituents know what the framework is and what the progress of this project is and what some of the unanswered questions are, and help people understand what his role is and how you have to build a staff, which is a very legitimate question to ask him. This isn't like running a ranch. Well, maybe it is. I don't know, Paul. You'll have to. But anyway, so I just please, when we bring people in, can we do our very best? You've got nationalwesternCenter.com. We've got documents up on what is that? NWC-CAC. Something or other? Yeah, and we've got documents in the library, and this is the time to really step that up. I'm hoping we can.
And as your
Liz, Mickey.
I appreciate your sharing the information on Brad. I really feel that the process has been totally untransparent. Even at this point, we have no idea who the other candidates are, what they brought to the table. And I think if this committee is going to be involved, they need to have more than a veto power after 2 weeks. I mean, that's, I don't really think that's real. I mean, this group is not going to say we're rejecting Brad. I mean, to come there and not give us who else was here, but say, this is who we selected, we think it's the best. It clearly may be best for the short term for the National Western to get it built. But at least I came in here with the idea that we had a much greater vision, that this was going to be a world-class place, that it was going to be an inspiration for the world in terms of the environment, in terms of food, in terms of culture, that we were going to bring the most qualified people from anywhere in the United States and the world to be part of this. And I think that we have looked at the short term. We've not looked at the vision of how we make this really a great place. I think we're focusing on how to make it functional, which clearly is part of it. But I think we need to look at the broader vision of how this is going to really be the place, the great place that's going to be outstanding in the world in terms of not just the stock show, but in terms of changing the environment, changing the world. And I don't, I know Brad, I've worked with Brad, I had a meeting with Brad in another week, and I have great respect for him. But really, in terms of the visionary to take this job forward, I just don't think he's the person for it. And I'm happy to discuss it with Brad and anyone else.
Can any of the authority members answer or refer to Mickey's issue about who the other candidates were? I mean, this has been a strictly authority search process, not.
But there's no I mean, what do? We don't get involved in any of these things. You basically bring nominations, you bring plans. They're already done. And we're picking the head of this whole thing, the leader, the inspiration, the visionary. At least we should be able to share who you're looking at. It isn't, I know you have the authority, and I'm not questioning your authority. I'm questioning the structure here that we basically don't really have any power. We're basically just acknowledging what the authority is doing and not really. This group doesn't make decisions, is not involved in it.
So Mickey, I'm going to have one of the authority members, you're looking at me and you got to be looking at the authority members because I have not been involved in the search process at all. So I'm going to have Monique or Paul or John address that issue because we've not been privy to the search process.
Well, I'm speaking to whoever's here.
Okay.
You happen to be.
I'm facilitating. I'm facilitating.
I'd be happy to talk a little bit about the process. Don't want to go into a lot of detail. We hired a world-class search firm that works with people who run these kinds of venues all over the world. The individual that runs the search firm came out to Denver and interviewed probably 100 different people to find out what it is that the community was interested in, and they went to their bank of people they know all over the world, and we came up with a job description, put that out. They, as I understand it, our search committee, which none of the three of us that are here were on.
No, I was. He was.
You were. Well, Paul, you should probably talk about this process then. Sorry.
No, I'll just take it up from there. So after Turnkey, which was the company, I think was, the whole CAC was told Turnkey was the company that did the search. They brought forth 10 finalists. Unfortunately, the way this process works, as much as I'd like to share all the names with you, all 10 of these people are currently employed. And if their boss found out they're interviewing, they'd be fired. Okay? So there was no way possible for the search committee or the authority board to jeopardize a person's living and share all 10 names with you all. So I wish in the real world it were possible. That would be great. But we're not going to jeopardize someone's living for this process to occur the way that it, I'd love it if we could have put all 10 of them in front of you, but we couldn't. The final 4 were interviewed by the board, and Brad was chosen by the board to come forth as the finalist, the only finalist. We could have selected 2 or 3. We didn't, because in our opinion, Brad was clearly the most qualified of all the candidates. And so that's how it happened. Apologize if you don't like the way that happened, but that's the way it had to happen.
Other questions, comments? John?
Well, Mickey, I don't share your feelings. You're certainly entitled to them. But again, I'm going to bring that adage up, that thin line. And what Paul said was pretty hard for me to deal with, but I signed a statement when I got appointed, conflict of interest statement. And it would certainly have been a conflict if I would have divulged the names of the other applicants. There's, I think, a high degree of respect and honor on the authority to respect other people's wishes as much as there is on this advisory committee here. You're certainly entitled to your feelings and your beliefs, but it's time to move ahead. And that's what we're going to do. We've got the minimum time of 14 days publication. We'll probably extend that. You then, knowing Brad and worked with him before, probably will have a little one-up on everyone else around. But that, I look at as a real benefit for us. You'll see some things that obviously I wouldn't or not able to. So I'm pretty satisfied, and as your representative appointed by the mayor to the authority, I feel that a strong obligation to do so.
You don't represent us. You're appointed by the mayor. We didn't select you.
You know what? Whether you agree to it or not,
Just make that clear.
if you don't want me to represent you, just
No, I'm not saying
say
that.
it.
I'm saying that
Because
you're appointed by the mayor. We didn't select you. That's all I'm saying.
You voted for the mayor, didn't you?
That's a state law. I didn't vote for the mayor.
Well, I'm not sure. Tell him about
Well,
that.
tell him whatever you're going to say.
Well,
But thank you for your comments, though.
well, thank you. You know, you're certainly welcome.
Let's move on.
And
Thank you. Let's move on.
yes, that's about damn time we move on.
Thank you.
So I have a quick procedural question and just a couple things. Does the board authority make the final hire? Does the city council have to approve this hire?
The board authority.
Okay.
Under the framework agreement.
Under the framework agreement.
Under
okay.
the framework agreement, the board hires
Okay.
the CEO.
And that's a step for us to recognize how this organization and this entity is standing up now. The comment I wanted to make on this process is that I was respectfully received by a drum I was beating, kind of in response to what you were saying, Mickey, wanting to see something like what occurred when they hired the district or the countywide librarian. They had this really great forum down at the main branch with the finalists, and hundreds of people came, and we were able to ask questions back and forth, and it was even checked out legally whether they could do that. I kept bugging the people on the board, and it was the case. And I like that kind of thing because it helps candidates and it helps everybody. But there was very serious considerations with this type of a hire and this type of recruitment along the lines of what Paul was saying. It's a dilemma. And my biggest disappointment, and I did express this to Brad, and one of my disappointments, I was really looking for some dynamic new blood from outside of the area, something that really rocked the house around what the sum is greater than the parts is on this. And that doesn't necessarily in the end have to be a disappointment in what the direction is, but it certainly is a part of what the challenge is in the conversation that I think we should have with Brad in this process. So I just feel like and I think that that's part of his job. If he's qualified for this, he will rise to all of these questions within the context of what this project is at its best and its most visionary. And if the authority board has made a decision here based on practicalities that are complexities that we should understand in the first things first sense, I'm always feeling like this project is over my head and how to get it built and trying to be vigilant, then we have to be able to make that challenge part of how we're talking to Brad too, and how we're monitoring it. And then we go forward and we try to help more and more of the neighborhoods, people in the neighborhoods understand where they have to come in with their vigilance, because what any staff person that I've seen over my lifetime that's in this position that has a public vetting does, it's kind of like politics. The person that's elected is partly shaped by what they go through in the campaign, although I hope it's not, just in that arena of relationship. What I'm saying is, this is on-the-job training for anybody that's going into this, and this is part of what I feel we need to bring is the intensity, focus, and seriousness of the challenge and conversation over the next 2 weeks. And so I hope we as the CAC really bring people to the table for this. And I think Brad wants, aside from any feelings, I think Brad, from my eye to eye with him, being very forthright, I think that he wants that challenge. I think that he wants to rise to that, and it's up to him.
So I have another procedural question of the authority board members, because it's a minimum of 14 days. Your next authority board meeting is not till the 27th of September, correct? So it has to be a minimum of 14 days, but we can exceed those 14 days to have continual dialogue, right? I'm looking for a nod of heads here to see what happens, because you guys are not having a special meeting at the end of 14 days.
No, you're not.
Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet, but
No,
Joe could
but
call
it's
that.
possible.
The chairman could call that.
Chairman, that's up to the chairman.
Okay, well, yeah, okay.
That was not proposed today
Right.
at our meeting, but we did discuss that 14 days is probably the minimum and that to get, these kind of community forums together will probably take more than 14 days.
Right.
14 days is the legal minimum requirement. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Okay.
John, question. Was there any discussion in the executive session at the board this morning as to members of the board authority participating, committing themselves to participating, so that there's a consistent presence of absorbing what the conversations are to take back into the final consideration, with the engagement with the neighborhoods over the 14 days?
There was some discussion as to how that would happen.
Okay, can you sort of talk about that?
Well, we're in the process. That's what you and I are going to be.
But I mean, actually having the board authority members attend as part. I mean, because what this is information for, as I interpret it, this is these conversations and the engagement. It's not just for Brad to meet the population because there's a de facto decision here. This is part of the information, the relationships, the questions, the challenges, Brad's answers, evaluating him along the way, and that's part of the authority board's vigilance, in my opinion. And maybe I'm naive, but I would expect the authority board to want to have some kind of direct experience with what these engagements are with the constituency as part of this process.
My position on that would be a little of both. I think whatever authority member wants to involve himself or herself in the process, certainly welcome to do that. Some people obviously have some business and time constraints to do an extended outreach on that effort, but they certainly express some concern as to how we go about it.
Is that as far as it went? Because there's a difference between that and saying, let's have the eyes and ears there. Does somebody else understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, we understand what you're
We
saying.
recognize we need to put a plan together, AE.
Okay.
The challenge always is that we're all volunteers.
As are we.
Yep, as are you. You point that out. And so that is our next step, is a plan. It will probably take a few days to get that together, and we, of course, have a long weekend coming up here. But I'm committed, I think probably some of us in this room are committed to making sure that Brad's conversation with the community is successful, and that means gathering that input, that means going with him, especially where we have spheres of influence. I can't speak for all the others, but there was a very wide consensus among the authority board members, and I think that many more of our co-board members will want to participate in that process. We just need to put it together.
Mickey?
Just two things. One, I wrote an extensive letter on the RFP process. One, suggesting that getting an entertainment and sports complex expert to pick who was going to be the next leader here was a little too narrow in terms of what our vision was. Secondly, I sent an extensive letter. I spoke on the phone to the head of the National Western, and certainly it does not appear as if the comments in terms of what I expressed or any invitation from anyone to say what's your concern happened. So to say that it is inclusive, and I know you can't have everybody there, but certainly there was nothing that really gave me any indication that there was any consideration at all of what I thought was the larger issue of the vision and how to make this a world complex.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that you should bring your concerns to the conversation with Brad Buchanan.
I will.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? So where I am hearing that you guys are leaving it is there's going to be a plan developed in terms of forums or dialogues throughout the community. It has to go at least 14 days. Obviously, somebody has to work through Brad's schedule. So we'll hear more from you, John, and Liliana. I know you guys talked as to how you guys are proceeding. And Melody, since you're here, I presume you're absorbing all of this, who is the only employee of the National Western Center Authority right now. So we will be keeping you all posted as to what next steps are, and it'll happen relatively quickly because it has to. Any other party comments? Okay. All right, Monique, you are now up for your community benefits agreement update.
Thank you, Maria. We have a few standing and ad hoc committees as part of our board work, and one of the ad hoc committees was the CEO search committee. One of the standing committees for now is the Community Benefits Committee. I have volunteered to chair this small but mighty committee. It's myself, Liliana, and Pat Grant. And we've been working together to educate ourselves about what community benefits agreements are. And we decided to start with sharing some of that education that we've done with our authority board members. And we wanted to bring some of that to you here tonight. But really this presentation is more of a discussion starter. And I will be seeking some input. We want to be able to capture some of the additional questions that you have. We want to give you a little bit of a 50,000 or 100,000 foot idea of what a CBA is, what a process may look like, and a very broad outline of a timeline about when we want to be able to create an actual community benefits agreement. So, very simply, a community benefits agreement is about making economic development more accountable to community needs. And we try to do kind of a literature search about what's out there regarding community benefits agreements, because this is a public practice. There's a body of work out there. There are probably several hundred of these agreements that exist today and have probably started about 20 years ago. Here's another definition, a little bit more concrete, a little bit more detailed. A legally enforceable contract signed by community groups and a developer in which the developer agrees to provide community benefits as part of a project. Now, our community benefits agreement is probably going to be a lot broader than this. We do not have a single developer. We do not have, one or two neighborhood groups. We have a pretty broad community, and this project is large. It has a lot of moving parts. It's pretty complicated. So just because this is a defined legal construct, we do have some, we can be more creative, and we can create something that is broader and covers more of the community and more of community needs. This is a very simple visual map of what this structure might look like. We wanted to provide words and also visuals because we know people learn in different ways. So a coalition of the community, and we need to be as inclusive as possible on the front end of this process. The actual agreement, and we know on the one side that the authority board will probably be the signatory to the community agreement on that side. As far as who the signatory is, who's going to sign for the community, we need to build that because it isn't just the CAC or the GES coalition. It's going to have to be a coalition of coalitions. We set about in our discussions coming up with some simple and guiding principles to move us forward. And these were really the words that represented concepts that we wanted to guide our process going forward. That our process be equitable, that it be inclusive, that it be democratic, that it be accountable. And that's two-way accountability, community to authority, authority to community. And that it be sustainable, because as we all know, we're trying to create something that's going to live at least 100 years. This slide is under construction because we'd like to create a mission statement using those guiding principles. And we are all volunteers. We're still hashing this out ourselves, but we wanted to let you know we want to be guided by a mission statement. When we looked at dozens of various community benefits agreements that are out there, we tried to distill what are some of the components of good community benefits agreements. So we kind of distilled this down to 5 or 6 points that we saw as we looked at a wide range of community benefits agreements across the country, of a wide variety of different kinds of projects. So again, that inclusive process with substantial community involvement and professional facilitation. We know we're going to need to hire some professionals to help us to get through this process. Again, because we're all volunteers and you're all volunteers. We want to make sure that this is tied to this specific project, this initiative, that there's mutual benefits for all stakeholders, that we address a wide range of community needs. This, on the front end of this process, we'll be able to be more visionary. Mickey will be able to dream a little bit bigger than just a developer and a project. However, we want to have measurable outcomes. We want to be able to revisit this agreement over time and make sure that it's living up to the expectations on all sides. And we want to have formal structures in place so that we can do that. But we have to define our parameters. What are we defining as community? And today at our authority board meeting, we talked about some very broad ideas of community that are even beyond the geographic area. But to start with, we felt like we've got to at least set some parameters. And as a committee, we decided the geographic area of the 3 neighborhoods that surround the National Western Center and the National Western Center, and then all of the stakeholder groups that we could think of that comprise that ecosystem, the 3 neighborhoods and the National Western Center. So we, in very broad terms, we laid out the categories of stakeholders. We also wanted to take a look at a snapshot in time of what we know about this community, these communities right now. So because this is a two-way construct, we want to make sure that we're not just talking about one-way benefits, or that we're talking about the needs of the community or the deficits of the community, but the assets of the community as well. So this isn't exhaustive, but we tried to get as much as we could on a slide and try to cover all of the kinds of assets that we have in the community. But we also wanted to acknowledge the challenges and the threats that this community faces, even from the building of the National Western Center. And I don't think anything here is a surprise to anyone in this room. We also want to take a little bit of a look at numbers and some data and information. So again, this is a snapshot in time from a couple of different sources, but numbers of residents, numbers of businesses, all the different categories of stakeholders. This is a very vague 100,000-foot process, but it really does visually outline the major milestones that we will have to move through as we get started on this process. So again, we want to make sure that we have a professional facilitation individual or a team that helps all of us. The initial phases will be listening, brainstorming, and building that coalition of coalitions. The actual work is going to be that negotiation and building consensus around what are the community needs we're going to serve. And then ultimately, hopefully signing and implementing and monitoring and ensuring accountability for a community benefits agreement. So we outlined a little bit of information about what a process might look like and what kinds of things we're going to need as part of a process. We had some questions also, and in lieu of a finalized CBA, are there ways to leverage opportunities now? And actually, at every authority board meeting that we've had so far, we get a report from some of the stakeholders, equity partners, in particular CSU has been very good about ensuring and already starting that community benefits process by providing some of those benefits. And we want to make sure that we capture what's already going on now and make sure that those are codified in a community benefits agreement. So here are some of the big questions that we've started to capture, and I'd love to capture some of those tonight. Not to put you on the spot, but any big questions that you want to share with us tonight. This will not be your last opportunity to do that. But as I mentioned, who signs for the community? That's a huge question. I think we're going to get to that working through this process. And some of these questions and answers we'll also need legal research, different kinds of research. Luckily, we have a contract attorney now who's helping us with some of that research and some of those answers. Today, we talked about the broader community. So how are we accountable beyond GES? It may not be directly in a benefits agreement, but we need to probably acknowledge that in the agreement. This is just kind of our bibliography. And we want to start moving forward. But I do want to get some of the questions that some of you may be thinking about right now, or that you've been holding for maybe weeks or months. If we can capture those tonight, that would be helpful.
Questions? Dave?
When does this community committee get started?
Thanks for asking. Let me start with where we want to potentially end, because we have to get this done. We don't want it to go on forever. We're hoping that we'll have an agreement by sometime next spring. So to make that happen, if we back up from trying to get this in the spring, it means getting started this fall. So the first thing we have to do is probably find a facilitation team, and then we've got to figure out that very inclusive process. We've got to make sure that we reach out to everyone. So we're going to, I know that you all go to a lot of meetings. Maybe we can piggyback onto other meetings, but we need to get started this fall and we're going to need your help. We're going to need the help of other groups in the community to be able to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible. And I want to point out that Joe Garcia and I had a conversation with Mayor Hancock sometime in May, and that was the one big thing that he really stressed was on the front end of this process, we need to be as inclusive as possible. So I would say this fall to hopefully next spring.
Now, Elyria and Swansea are kind of being taken care of by through the National Western and the I-70 project. But here again, Globeville's, we're ignored again. And we need, people to look at the west side of the river, not just the east side and Elyria and Swansea. Globeville's been neglected again and again and again. And this feels like another one. So we would like to definitely be on this committee and look at things.
So Globeville is part of the process, part of the community. We're certainly not overlooking Globeville, not at all. And we don't know that what this is going to look like. We don't know that this is going to be a committee just yet. We'll need your help. We'll need the help of some legal advice to ensure that we have a good governance structure for representation that will ultimately be signatory from the community.
There might be a little bit of a clarification needed here. The subcommittee is a subcommittee of that Monique is reporting out from, David, is a subcommittee of the authority board. It contains only members of the authority board. It's like a working committee that is not exclusionary. It is acting on the mandate that was in the framework agreement, that first order of business that had to be on the first agenda, which we spoke up for in here, just thanks to us speaking up, had to address the community investment fund and the benefits. So this is a mechanism for the authority board to assign its tasks to then go out to the next layer out here. So that was not an exclusionary thing to members of the community. And I don't know if that was clear.
Thank you, AE, for that clarification. I didn't pick up on it, Dave. I'm sorry.
There's one thing I wanted to add that was discussed at the authority board too. Can I do that now?
Yeah.
Okay. But first I want to say to everybody, the authority board meetings are open. The reason I go is I just have a strong feeling of accountability to this process, and I can't extract myself from it. It's an illness. But I want to encourage people to go to the authority board. There is also a public comment process. And in this process, I wanted to bring to the CAC something that I addressed in response to some very reasonable considerations that have to do with that slide that said the one is the accountabilities beyond Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea State, city, state, etc. I don't know if you remember that one. There was some discussion regarding the fact that in the context of this benefits package and the community investment fund, that there's accountability beyond just Denver, beyond GES. And then it was brought back to focus a little bit with what I feel are two important comments. One was John Zapian's and one was mine in regards specifically to GES. And John pointed, and John, correct me if I paraphrase you, but I want people to know this is a way to some accountability. In timelining the rollout of the benefits, GES comes first.
Correct.
Okay. And I felt that was a very important statement to have on the table.
Made an emphasis out on that, Dave. Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea come first.
Yep.
Come first.
And the whole world cannot sign on this, right? Dave?
Well, we can get
parameters.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go to those. Let me finish up to complete my thought, and then let it go into the full discussion. Okay. The thing I added to that in the public comment was that the timeline is important, but it is intrinsic to this entire project that Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea are a first priority relative to the benefits of the emergence of the National Western Center. And it goes all the way back to the original jumpstart concepts that came out of OED came forward. It became part of the reason for the formation of the National Western Center Citizens Advisory Committee, which was originally to align the relationships between the National Western Stock Show and the neighborhoods and merging into the National Western to make sure that the neighborhood plans and the master plan and all this stuff was coordinated in such that the rising up together of the neighborhoods occurred with the benefits exchange with this project. And so that is a structural, to me, a structural mandate that means that part of the design of this project, and I'm just speaking what I feel here, and people may feel totally different. The design of this project is interwoven with the progress and fulfillment of all of the aspirations of these neighborhoods relative to revitalization, workforce, education opportunities, becoming co-shepherds of the National Western as something that, as Steve Nally says, is nested in these neighborhoods. So I just want to say that to me it is an institutional obligation for this project for GES to be a perpetual priority relative to what's emerging, not to the exclusion of any other neighborhoods, but to make it an help GES become part of the leadership as enriching neighborhoods to help extend benefits to the other accountabilities, the city, the state, the world, etc. So I just feel like we need to keep calling that out. It is written into the fabric of what this project is.
Dave?
It still sounds like Mickey was saying, we still don't get to participate. It still falls back on the authority board.
Well, this whole entire thing we're talking about is an engagement process. That I don't know how to. It's a legitimate concern. The decision making as to what the benefits are that would be chosen as priorities has not been made, nor has it been determined which people from within the neighborhoods, which mechanisms among this process would cause that to be possible. The suggested benefits have not been brought to the center table to fill the basket of potentials. We have to create that process. We have to populate that process. We have to create the policies, the procedures, and the legal proceedings in collaboration with the authority board. That is part of what the CAC has to do. I will give one example. I've been beating the drum for something I still feel would be a great approach. Let's look again at how the general obligation bond engagement was done with this broad scope of bringing in the population without censor, saying to the populations in the neighborhoods across the city, bring in your suggestions for how you'd like to use the general obligation bond. Bring these in. That can happen in Global, Elyria, and Swansea. There's a model. It was a process that first asked for broad imagination, broad aspirations, and then in a public discussions, these were all public committee meetings, talked about, do these projects align legally with what the general obligation bond is supposed to do? Do they meet the criteria? Well, we're going to be setting the criteria with the authority board for the benefits agreements. Is that correct? We're going to be working together with the authority board. It's not like, okay.
I want to put this slide back up to let you know that this is an equal arrangement. One side is the authority board signing, the other side is the community. And to get to this, we have to have a very broad community process. We're not leaving out the community. We can't. It's called a community benefits agreement.
One of the essence that we have to deal with here, and Mickey, Dave, Vern, and anyone, Armando leave?
Yes.
Nobody's trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes in this process. We're trying to be upfront and on the table with everything that we're doing. Otherwise, Monique wouldn't be here this evening. It's an uphill task, and at this point, you either buy into it or criticize it. You make your choice. But the process is going to move forward. We have to. We're 6 months behind, in my estimation, already. We have a moral and ethical obligation by the mayor's direction to Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea. That's first. Secondly, every other precinct in the city and county of Denver. The vote for 2C was overwhelming. We have to respect that vote, how we solicited and how it was delivered. That's an ethical and moral obligation that the authority must carry forward. Thirdly, the statewide effort, because of the state funding that was involved and with the partners, the CSU, museum, City and County of Denver, and this poor struggling rancher that I met 6-7 years ago from Sterling up here somewhere. We had a couple snorts together down here, and he said, John, if they can fix that damn stock show, I'd be so happy. I said, you give us a chance. I got his name written down somewhere, Paul. One of these days I'll get it to you. And he said, I'd be tickled to death. But please don't leave us out, you know. We have an obligation to the people of the state of Colorado. Number one, Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. Number two, City and County of Denver. Thirdly, but not lastly, the citizens of the state of Colorado. And that's going to be the basis for some of your concerns, Mickey, because out of that will rise the global concerns about food production, water management, and everything else that goes into ranching and farming. And I'm very confident that that can happen. But we're at the point now, we got to make this thing work. If you want to be a part of it, the door's open. If you want to stand back and point the finger and criticize, feel free to do so. But we're moving forward. Thank you.
And
so real quickly, I'm assuming that this community benefits agreement is going to impact and involve everything within the National Western boundary, correct? So the reason why I asked that question is I know that there will be at some point in time some private development. And so I guess I would just say that if there's anything moving forward regarding the private development, that, you know, an RFP or whatever, that it's embedded in those documents so that if there's a clear understanding of anyone who would be engaging, that this is part of the deal of them doing anything on site. So.
And the private development's on the agenda for tonight, so we'll cover that. I want to make sure that everybody here understands that your community committee is open to the public.
It is, our meetings are open to the public, they're noticed, and John's welcome to join our committee. He might be saving himself for another committee, I don't know.
We will make sure that we will, we'll coordinate with Melody, we'll make sure that when you set up times that the CAC gets ample notice as to when these meetings are going to be. So,
thank you, Maria.
I just want to, if I may, draw one distinction in relationship to what you said, John. Just kind of call it out a little bit more. And I addressed this as best I could at the board authority too, in the conversation, the discussion, and the public comment. Yes, this project has a accountability citywide, statewide, worldwide, etc. But there's a special obligation that is to Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea that is very, in my understanding, and I really want people to register this, very specific to Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, because these neighborhoods are the neighborhoods in proximity to the greatest stress and possible impact of this project, in combination with these neighborhoods being the chronically neglected neighborhoods in the arenas that affect a population's ability to have a quality of life and break cycles of economic limitation and being marginalized. So there is in the structure of this a particular obligation, in my opinion, And I think the founding documents reflect this. There's a particular obligation for this benefits agreement and for the Community Investment Fund to be accountable through to measurable impacts to the improvement of what's going on in Global, Elyria, and Swansea, which is not to the exclusion of any larger extension into the populations across the city, the state, etc. I really do feel that is going to have to be a measurable impact that is a first priority structured into this. And we will discuss this, how this can happen. I support the other side of the river, by the way, being brought in with the greater attention, and I think there's good conversations going in that direction. So I just wanted to point that out, as I really feel that's part of what we're looking at here.
Okay. Anything else, because we need to move on to the next parts of the agenda? Thank you, Monique.
Thank you.
And we will make sure that everybody knows when your next committee meeting is.
Great.
All right, Gretchen, the NWC.
Thanks, and we're gonna, we have, as always, quite a bit of content to move through, so I'll just ask our team, acknowledging that we are half an hour until the stated end of the meeting, we'll move as quickly as we can. I want to note that you'll continue to see the National Western Center office at the city leading the construction on phases 1 and 2. It's important to note that we meet on a regular basis with you. We show you our materials. We show them to the stock show, to CSU. We've been holding an empty seat at the table for the CEO of the authority. So we are happy that the process is moving forward. We think that's going to add a lot of value to what we're doing on the construction side. We're essentially we're the construction team that's building for a client, and that client is the authority. We build the campus, they need to bring it to life, and the sooner they're able to engage with us with that leadership position, the better chance we have of building the right site. So we've collected a lot of input, and we're going to continue to bring all of that same material here. You'll see it today in 2 sections, and we do this every time. Phases 1 and 2, and that's a lot of the detail that the placemaking team is here to present. And then also future phases, which we call the triangle, and we'll start to bring you that material as it begins to move forward. I do want to note that because our deputy in this office is named Brad, that's going to get really confusing. So I'm going to call him Bradley. We need to change his name tag.
Why do I have to change?
I would also like to note that when Joe Garcia was appointed as the chairperson of the authority, I got a number of conciliatory, sorry you lost your jobs, and I'm getting those again today. I still am employed with the city. I'm still the executive director of the National Western Center office for the city. There are many seats that need to be filled to accomplish this program, and many roles. And so from our perspective, I'm thrilled that we're continuing to move forward through this process. I have a couple of updates here, and then I'll hand it over to the placemaking team, and then I'll come back to talk about the triangle. We always want to show you what we're doing. We presented these slides at the authority meeting today. Look at the number of contracts that are already in progress. We've gone through these. So you'll see in the upper left box, that's that campus placemaking team that continues to come here and present. They have 3 task orders. We walked through those in detail. On the bottom right, you'll see the design contract pending City Council approval for the Stockyard Event Center, which is that smaller building within the 20-acre stockyards. Next slide shows our active procurement. All of this is on nationalwesterncenter.com. Active procurement right now for construction of the maintenance and operations facility. That's that purple building on the north end of the site. That's where our construction team office will be moving in December. Thank you, Vanna. And that's an active procurement right now. And then upcoming, you can actually see the end of all the procurements that we'll be doing for phases 1 and 2. That's that $765 million funded project. It's the only funded phases are phases 1 and 2. And you'll see us moving forward with construction then of the same Stockyard Event Center. And then both design and construction contracts moving forward for the 2 largest buildings on the campus, the Equestrian Center and the Livestock Center. You're going to hear the placemaking team talking about these buildings today, how they sit on the site, how we move through and around and back to community and back in the site.
how they are porous and what the design features will be. All of these are the continued conversations that we're bringing here and that we will share with the authority as well, and look for direction from you and them really as the clients that we're building for. On the next slide, just a reminder that there has been a lot of work done on the 1909 historic building. That's really in the future phases. It's looking at it from two perspectives. What would it take to reconstruct this facility, really from a rehabilitation perspective, because it's a historically designated site, which is very important. Also, how can we make this site work as a truly public and affordable fresh food market? And that's something that we feel is one of the ways that as a construction team we can be addressing community and benefits even on the physical infrastructure side. So we are expecting a report to be released in January of 2019, but you'll see components of this report used in this work that we're doing on future phases too. So when we get closer to that and we've got some initial findings, I haven't seen them yet from the group, we'll bring those here real time. And on our next slide, on the agenda I'm out of order, but maybe I'll just keep going through if everyone's okay with that. Yep. Future phases, right? So this is what we call the triangle. We've presented this here a number of times. We've also presented at the bottom the estimated procurement timeline. So where you see PBI coordination, that's the Performance-Based Infrastructure Office of the City. It's a separate entity from NWC-CAC. We are working with them as they stand themselves up. We plan to, as a city and through the PBI office, issue an RFQ for triangle development. And that's where we need to be very upfront about some of the issues, particularly community collaboration. That's something that we've put into our energy procurement that we've talked about here. That's language we'll need to talk to you all about. I think the other two issues that I've heard from you that we need to be talking about in this session ahead of an RFQ, that's request for qualifications release, is around historic assets and housing, particularly affordable housing. Those are the themes that we hear come up in community, and we will want you to help us create that language that goes into the RFQ. So we will be asking for some special sessions with you and unfortunately more time. We've had a number of special sessions on placemaking. They've been really productive. I think it's going to be important for us to have some special CAC sessions to really be able to spend some time outside of this very packed agenda to talk about those issues. So if you could think about, in addition to those three areas that right now I'm planning on bringing here for discussion, if there's something else we should be bringing forward, you know, we'll bring forward generally the summary of what we're doing, but those seem like the three areas to have more in-depth work on. How we talk about housing, if housing is proposed on the site, then what do we say about affordable housing? Second, what do we do with a community collaboration section here that needs to be addressing directly this development of a community benefits agreement? And then last, how do we talk about the historic properties, particularly the work that we've already done here around the 4701 Brighton building. And I'm already drafting the language that says we have to hold that spot for the reconstruction of that building in that location, that's historically significant to community and that interface. So some of it we know, but we don't know all of it, and we need to talk through a lot of that language. Is there anything else on the... I can go all the way through and come back to questions. On the energy update, we're actually in an active procurement, so I can't share a lot of details. Interviews happened this week with 4 highly qualified teams, and we will have continued deliberation and selection of a team next week, and then we'll come back to you with that. But we are thrilled with the interest and then the integrity and quality of the teams coming forward to accomplish a net zero campus at National Western. This is what happens next. So you'll see these campus-wide services that we talked about in the framework agreement. These are the services that we see most closely attached to the physical construction of the site, starting with energy and water, moving through discussions with Excel, Metro Wastewater, Denver Water on campus water services, moving to concessions and pouring rights, is something that we have some work to do to understand what that looks like as we go through with construction. Is there a commissary kitchen? How does this look? How is it activated in the buildings? IT infrastructure and smart campus is something that we need to plan for ahead of time for the trunk infrastructure needs. And digital signing and advertising will be something that we accomplish in connection with rezoning of the campus. So this is a look ahead to what we're doing. Brad Lee Dodson will be helping to lead these efforts. We are onboarding some additional subject matter experts as we have information and do this work for the rest of this year in 2019. We'll bring that forward to you also. And is that my last slide? So I just want to say, next month I won't be here. I'm taking my stepdaughter to look she's applying to CSU and CU, but she's also going to look at the University of Kentucky. So I'll be taking her there and to visit family. Bradley may not be here. His wife is expecting a baby in a month. And he's going to leave right after this report out ahead of the placemaking team because he needs to get home. So you'll see him duck out. But so you will have other folks from our team here. I just wanted to let you know that ahead of time. Are there questions on any of it? We bring a lot of the materials each time, but happy to do a deeper dive.
Questions? None? David. Okay, Dave, sorry.
I know you guys think I'm a pain in the butt, but
No, we love you, David.
But I've been here my whole life, and I keep asking, when can we get a bus tour of the campus so we can get a very, better look at what's going on, possibly where you're going to put affordable housing, and also we can take a tour to look at both sides of the river and really what it's really all about. You know what I'm saying? And I'd like to see that happen before the snow flies.
Sure. But that was 5 years ago. Good idea. We'll get to work on it.
Is this, we probably have to do that on a Saturday, just because I don't know that we'd have time evening-wise, so it gets dark earlier, so, okay.
So we'll work on it, David. We'll give you a report by next month.
The drone flyover.
A drone flyover. Okay. Eric. Jay. Here. John.
Maybe a night tour would be appropriate to see.
I think a night tour of Riverside on or around
To see
October.
reality does
I think a night tour of Riverside on or around October 31st would be really good.
Oh, that would
Maybe La Llorona will come out again.
That's right.
Heron Pond.
There it is. All right, so we had actually just 1 week ago a really great, what I've been calling a deep dive session with the CAC. Many of you were in attendance. And so just a really quick recap on that before we give our current update. So what we did is we actually presented, Dennis Rubo was along from Studio Insight, Meredith Wisnowski from Livable Cities, and myself. We all presented different pieces. But there was a framework for the open spaces. So we're talking about those connections through the neighborhoods to the campus, what the user experience will be, where those 365-day-a-year uses are, and some of the ideas for where we might program different events. One of the really interesting things that Dennis presented was the scale of some of the spaces. So I would encourage you to check out the presentation from last week online if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, because the scale is pretty amazing. 20 acres for the Stockyards multipurpose event area, for instance, is extremely, extremely large. And what we looked at were some of the spaces like the kind of entry plaza that'll be between the animal health facility, the legacy building, and the livestock arena. Those types of spaces are as large as some of those entry spaces by the Pepsi Center. Some of the interstitial spaces between the buildings are the scale of the plazas in front of the Union Station building. So again, check those out. Those will be informative if you do get a chance to look at those for our next deep dive session coming up in September. It's kind of crazy, it's going to be September already. We're going to be circulating actually another, I guess it would be a hard copy analog doodle poll that will
Stop
circulate
making
around.
fun of my hard copy analog doodle poll. I'm passing this around. It seemed to work the last time. Please mark the dates you are able to attend. So just an X in the box of the days that you are able to attend, please. Thank you.
Perfect. So that deep dive will be on the public space conceptual design. So we're going to get into the actual design of the plazas, of the streets, all the streets, and how that all is tying together with the pedestrian bridges, with the bridges over the river. And so really excited about that session coming up. So that will be sometime in September based on the input that we received this evening. What I wanted to do for our update, and I'll keep this pretty quick, we handed out last week, for those who were in attendance, a questionnaire about the user experience. So I'll give you just a really brief overview of what that is. That is available again this evening. It's also available online. Liz has sent that out.
Yes.
We wanted to give you preliminary streetscape concepts that are being developed for National Western Drive. So a really quick overview of that. And then 2 slides is all that's necessary for the overview of the design guidelines and standards. We'll do a dive into those in a future session, but we wanted to give you an idea that that is starting and what that entails. And then Julie is going to give us a community outreach update. So the questionnaire is actually part of this user experience piece of Task Order 3. Task Order 3, remember, is about the design of the space, the user experience. How are we making sure that we're creating a really great experience for 365-day-a-year employees on the site, for visitors to the site, for people using the site for an event maybe once a year, maybe it's a farmer's market, and absolutely neighborhood residents. So we're doing this deep dive. Previously, we had talked a lot to people about how they use the site currently. So this is a focus on looking at the conceptual plans, the site plan, everything we know to date, and a lot of that is obviously up in the air, but everything we know to date, how do people anticipate that they will use the site? So we can start to think about different amenities, everything from where you might go out to eat or grab food, to, and 1909 Arena is obviously one of those opportunities, but other opportunities for that, where you might recreate. Do you want a walking loop on the campus? Benches, all these different aspects. Learning opportunities, interpretive opportunities. So we've broken this into 10 different categories of potential users. And so some of those you'll see currently use the site, many do not. So it's also an opportunity to educate them about the National Western Center and the master plan and the work that's currently being done. And then what we prepared for you all specifically was this questionnaire with open-ended questions. And so thinking about the user experience. And so if you have not filled that out yet, we would encourage you to do so. You don't have to do it by the end of the meeting. You can get it back to Liz in the next week or two. Quite frankly, you could probably just bring it back to our next deep dive session even if you needed to. The next piece that I'll hit on is the streetscape concepts for National Western Drive. So we're focusing on the northern portion of National Western Drive, which if you have been tracking along with kind of the baseline and what is being funded in phases 1 and 2, we're not really touching too much of National Western Drive to the south, really just how it intersects here with the new Betty Cram Drive. So what we're focusing on right now is this portion to the north. It has a pretty similar cross-section. We presented those, I think it was 2 meetings ago. Chris Vogelsang from OV was present. So there's a pretty similar cross-section from Betty Cram Drive to to the north edge of the equestrian facility, and then a slightly different section moving north to Race Court. So this is one of the concepts that we're playing around with. We chose this section. This is kind of the service drive. This would be 51st Street going over to the bridge, because it's where those 2 different sections come together. So the idea with this first concept is something that is a little more, I guess, urban in form. And we have an alternative to this, so just so you're aware. So one of the things that we're really keeping in mind that you'll see in both of these different concepts is these are going to be really important crossing areas, right? So Betty Cram obviously is another one, and we'll tackle that in our deep dive session in September when we look at design concepts for Betty Cram. But for National Western Drive, these crossings where you're coming around the equestrian facility, where you're crossing at 51st, are really critical pedestrian and bicycle connections. So we're really prioritizing that in the design. So that influences things, and you don't have to worry about this, but I'm happy to talk about it either when I'm done with the presentation or after the meeting. But it influences things like the turning radii on the curves, right? So are we creating these big sweeping curves that are great for semis, or are we trying to create short crossing distances for pedestrians and bicyclists that are really safe and inviting? Using materials, thinking about the lighting, the landscaping, to really create a strong sense of place. These are two cross sections then. So this is the southern portion, and then this is the northern portion. We're looking south in both of these. So this would be the riverfront side. This is actually the edge of the parking structure with it would actually be the service area and then the equestrian barn up here. And so looking at a bioswale, water quality treatment along that the edge of that right-of-way. If you recall from the previous presentation, this is a 4-lane cross-section, we would call that. 2 lanes in each direction. A lot of times it'll just be one single lane operating in each direction for the through travel movement. But then there's what's called a managed curb lane. You kind of think about it like a parking lane, but with a lot more flexibility. So if you have visited Union Station in the last probably 9 to 12 months, I think they installed it. But it's that frontage along Wing Coop where you have drop-offs for Ubers and Lyfts. You have bike corrals in there for extra bike parking. There's opportunities for other kind of multimodal uses of this. And then during a big event like Stock Show, it can actually be used for maybe through movement even. So, or bus drop-offs, shuttle drop-offs, things like that. So that's the concept for this more southern portion. When you get to the north edge of the equestrian barn, it actually would, in the baseline, go to a 2-lane section. We're exploring the potential of a 3-lane section up here too, meaning that there would be a center turn lane incorporated into this. So in both of those, we have water quality features that would tie to the riverfront. Here's some renderings of what that experience might be like along National Western Drive in this first concept. Again, this is heading south. So we're actually along the multi-use pathway along the west side of the road. You can see across the way. This is a placeholder. We do not plan on putting a solid wall along the parking structure, I promise you. But the idea of maybe having art along that edge. And then this is looking south from the multi-use path from the more northern section. So it's not as wide up here, but there are accommodations on both sides. Obviously, linkages right into the riverfront open space. And then this is actually the second concept. So this one, based on the concept or the feedback that we heard on the riverfront during our last meeting last week, I think we're leaning towards this concept, which is a more naturalized kind of concept, making bringing the feel along the riverfront, which people really gravitated towards restoring that habitat, creating a more naturalized experience along the riverfront with some really nice programmable spaces. So pulling that feel into National Western Drive, so it really feels like one great public space. So you can see that with, again, it's conceptual, but, kind of the flowing lines going through the intersections. Even the fact that the multi-use path might sort of undulate a little more than in that more urban concept, and having more natural planting in the bioswale as well. So pretty similar cross sections, those were determined earlier. But if you look at the renderings, you can see how it begins to feel a little different. So this is looking east from the 51st, from 51st Street. So it's looking towards that other intersection up here. That, again, a placeholder for the edge of the parking garage. We're looking at ways to potentially activate that. with green walls, looking at art, other screening opportunities, as well as at least having a placeholder for potentially active commercial ground floor uses as well. So making sure that that could be accommodated in a future phase. Here's looking south again along that multi-use pathway. You can see here, again, it has a more park-like setting versus something you might experience along, say, 14th Street in downtown, which I would compare more to that first option. So again, I think based on the comments that we heard last week, we're leaning towards this overall concept.
Vern?
Yeah, please.
Go back to that 151st Avenue exception.
That one? Yeah.
As I look at this, you know, there's a lot of abrupt corners and things in here. And I guess my first concern is how are you going to, you know, what about the trucks that are going to be servicing the National Western and things of these natures? How is that going to flow? Because what I see in this design is I see it more so just for vehicles and spectators and things of that nature. Secondly, as you have large numbers of cars and people exiting the National Western, I would see that street as sometimes made to all flow one way.
Yep.
Out of that area. And if you've got 3 or 4 lanes of traffic coming through there, I don't see how that flows well enough to get people off that site in a manner of time that they should.
Yeah, okay. So this rendering, I'm going to switch to the plan view because you can see the turning radii and whatnot a little better. This is actually just beyond the intersection. So this is the pedestrian crossing on one side of the 51st Street intersection. So when you're talking about sort of that it seems squared off, it is right here. But if you look at the plan view here, which I know is a little small, where we were looking from is right here. That's actually up on the sidewalk already, looking this direction. So these are turning radii, and we're working with the traffic engineers, we're with Public Works. We're looking at basically the industrial collector type standards, and then trying to see for the truck movements. And so that dictates turning radii. But we're also trying to obviously think about pedestrian movement from the neighborhood through, people maybe parking off-site or taking a shuttle, and then walking through. So it's sort of balancing those two. And then the second piece of your question or your comment about everything flowing one direction, you're absolutely right. If during stock show, it's really just vendor parking, but even all those vendors could be leaving at a similar time from the parking structure. So there'll be 3 points of egress from the parking structure. During non-stock show events, the yards could be parked as well, which is also quite a few vehicles, obviously. And so that would be upwards of 2,500 cars potentially could park in the yards, all potentially leaving maybe a concert at the same time. And so you're absolutely right. There would be multiple egress points along this edge, along National Western Drive. And then really here is where it would widen out to those 4 lanes, and we're designing it in a way that it can't all go in one direction. So it's maximum flexibility. So it could be 2 lanes in one direction, 1 lane in the other direction with parking. It could be 4 lanes all in one direction. Or as I said, in sort of most days, it'll be 1 lane in each direction with the managed curb lane next to it, assuming that there's not additional demand requiring more capacity.
Well, years ago, when we were conceiving this plan to come through, there was talk of pedestrian bridges that were going to come across. Why would not that be incorporated in this, so then you get people off of that traffic and you keep the flow of the people as well as the flow of the traffic going simultaneously?
So, well, pedestrian bridges are really good when you have a long, constant barrier. So basically, there's only one way to go. There's not the space and there's not the money to do a continuous median or something like that would actually preclude people from basically jaywalking. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that we want this to be a pedestrian-friendly area. And typically that when you create the grade separation between a pedestrian overcrossing or undercrossing, it basically communicates to the cars that they don't have to worry about pedestrians. So those are a couple of it's cost, it's thinking about the balance of the different uses, and then really trying to create a people-friendly place overall.
At capacity for the entire National Western, isn't most of the parking or a good portion of the parking going to be off-site anyhow?
During the stock show, yes, absolutely.
Well, you're saying only during the stock show. It's supposed to be a year-round type situation here. So I'm assuming that this is going to be an issue year-round, not just during the show.
Which issue are you bringing up, I guess?
Well, the issue of there's a lot of parking off-site.
Yep.
Somehow you got to get these people off of here unless you're going to bus them out of there, and that's what you're doing now, and you're trying to avoid that, correct?
No, there'll be shuttles still, yeah. So it'll be a combination of people walking to remote parking, but also shuttles. There's going to be a lot of transportation demand management, as the parking and TDM study showed, or sort of communicates, and a lot of that is actually being put in place this year already, is to promote alternative ways to get to the campus. So shuttles will continue to be a piece of that. Doing remote parking or getting people close by, maybe it's via the train, and then walking in is another option. But there's also Uber and Lyft, and OB is actually working with Western Stock Show Association on looking at how to accommodate that already this year and do a better job of sort of communicating that to people as an option, as well as all the different transportation options. But you're right, it's going to be a big sort of grab bag of ways that people will get to the site and off the site.
Jay, so what are all the egress points for the parking garage? I see one there. Is that
Yeah,
the
so
primary
here, and then there's one not shown right here.
Okay. So when you say there, so at the intersection, so is that going to be a signaled intersection?
We don't know yet, but most likely it would have some sort of traffic control there.
Yeah. Because I'm just imagining all these cars trying to get in and out, and
Yep.
you know, I mean, kind of, I think of the DCPA.
Yeah.
And the number of egress points they have on that garage.
We don't want to do the DCPA garage.
That's why. Yeah,
No,
so,
yeah.
okay.
That
so
thing's a
you're thinking
nightmare.
that- The other question I have is, it seems like it's a big blank wall when you were showing that.
It is right now, yeah. In the
So
rendering.
does the garage can't have any openings?
It absolutely can, and it
Okay.
actually needs to for ventilation. So
Okay, yeah, it would be a much more, even if you grow things on like graded, you know,
Yeah.
for security, if you need security.
yeah, that's what this is actually starting to show, some of those ideas
Yeah.
in the
yeah.
photos.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Other questions about this? Dave?
I can say something.
Yes?
All the way you guys ran the shuttles this year for the National Western was awesome. It was really easy to get back and forth, and I was riding them every day, so
Good.
you guys changed it around, it was really good. Thank you.
We better do the same thing next year then, Dave. That's good.
Any other comments on this? Mickey? Oops, nothing?
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll see a lot more cool renderings, conceptual design for the public spaces and streets at our September session. I have 2 slides here just letting you know about the design guidelines. We had a couple questions at our last meeting about what was going to be included in here. So this is an overview of the task order, our scope of work. But I think it's task 4.4 actually has an outline of the design guidelines. So like everything, there's plan management, there's public engagement that we'll be embarking on, which involves reaching out to you all, but also to the broader community on the design guidelines. There are some overall support deliverables, which are some research items and coordination items. But the really key thing here is task 4.4, which is the design standards and guidelines. So if you have not picked up or downloaded, gone to the website for CPD for the City, County, and Denver, there's actually quite a few sets of design guidelines or design standards and guidelines. They call them the DSGs all the time for these different areas. So in essence, there's an introduction that will talk about the area, tie back to the master plan and the vision. There'll be site design standards, So that's overall siting of different buildings. Most of those in phase 1 and 2 are already set in the site plan. But the triangle is also covered by the design standards and guidelines. So there's a lot of things that we don't know yet, what they're going to look like, what the use might even be, that are going to be covered with the design standards and guidelines. So this will be really important as we work through this with you in ensuring that even those pieces outside of phases 1 and 2 that NWC is charged with building currently, that we make sure that those kind of live up to the expectations that we have for being a fantastic place, really high quality design, having sustainability elements worked into those, so on and so forth. That also relates to the building design standards and guidelines. So that would be things like the transparency on the buildings, the floor to ceiling heights, how high can the buildings be, heights throughout the area, setbacks perhaps, and then looking at public space and riverfront open space. So what are the requirements? How much of that needs to be landscaped or soft? Thinking about the drainage and water quality aspects of that, how does that work in? Streetscape design is covered in here. It's not always in all DSGs, but for the campus, we are integrating streetscape design. There's also civic infrastructure. Signs will be addressed to a certain extent. There will be a sign plan developed also in conjunction with the overall zoning rewrite, or not rewrite, excuse me, but the rezoning of the property. That takes about a year, that overall process. And the last pieces are lighting and historic structures. So then obviously those documentation deliverables. We're modeling one of the most recent, or modeling this off of one of the most recent design standards and guidelines that have been developed, which were for Arapahoe Square. And so these are a few sample pages from the Arapahoe Square design standards and guidelines. So it's a combination of photos, original graphics that are developed. The City and County of Denver really likes to use 3D modeling to convey some of those ideas, where maybe there isn't a building that exists in Denver that does it just right. So you'll see the combination of these things, and it's a combination of what is desired as well as what we don't want to see. So there's a convention used where there's a green circle with a check for things that we want to see, and then there's also examples, bad examples, from other places, hopefully not from Denver, but in some cases they might be, with a red circle with an X. So you'll see those as well. So we're going to work with you on sort of understanding what is that design quality that we want to see. And so as individual designers come on board for different buildings, for different plazas and open spaces, and the streets get developed further, that these design guidelines will make sure that everything is living up to that bar that we're setting. Our last piece of our update, and there's no slides to go with this, is just Julie giving a couple-minute update on some of the outreach we've been doing this summer.
Thank you. I'll keep this short. I know it's late, but we haven't talked about outreach in a few meetings, so we wanted to give you a quick heads up of what we've been up to. We've really been taking advantage of the summertime, the summer seasons with community meetings going on all around the city, and we've been attending them. We've been showing up, talking about the National Western Center, educating people on the redevelopment, as well as the placemaking study, what we're trying to accomplish with it, and talking to them about how do you get involved and how do you get engaged. We've also been reaching out, similar to some of the work we've done here with you guys, is talking about what sort of programming would be of interest to people, what would attract people to the site, things around the riverfront, what sort of ideas and activities would you like to see around the riverfront. So we've been gathering these at meetings all around the city. We've made sure that we've done multiple meetings in each of the city council districts, just to make sure that we're spreading, we're focusing obviously on GES, but also as well as all the 2C voters basically around the region. So that's been our focus this summer. We're very excited in the fall. We're going to get back into, we're going to be doing another public meeting in Global area of Swansea. A lot of it's going to really focus around the renderings. As Jay said, we're going to start getting a lot more imagery, and I think it's so important to get these images out there, because I think that's what really helps people connect to the site. It really helps one to show a design plan or a 2D picture. It's going to be so much more powerful when we think people can actually get the look and the feel of the site. So that'll be in the October timeframe, sort of later October timeframe. We'll be looking at another public meeting. We'll absolutely make sure all you guys are involved in this in Global area Swansea, as well as continuing doing some of the intercept meetings around the region. Any questions?
I know you've discussed this, but
how is that really, for...
Put the mic to your phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. The 20 acres of stockyards, how is that going to be used other than the 20 days of the stock show?
So I think that a portion of the time it'll be used as parking. I think there's obviously the opportunity for events, and so it'll ultimately be up to the authority to program that. But I know that, or I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that Stock Show Association during at least the Denver County Fair will utilize a portion of that area for midway, for rides, things like that. But what we're looking at is actually scaling some of the facilities, and Eric was going to show these, but he told me I should just do it. So this is a working model that we have put together, and so we've been using it as a sort of internal kind of testing, analysis, study tool. But as things start to firm up, we'll actually use this to create renderings. And to entice you to come to the mid-September meeting, I'll let you in on a little secret. We're hoping to actually be able to do some virtual reality, which would actually allow you to put goggles on and sort of get in the space, which I think is really, really important, because what it's doing for us is you really get a sense of the scale of these spaces and sort of how big the buildings are and how far apart the buildings are. So to your point, Nikki, if we look through these, and I'll get to the stockyards in just a moment, you can start to see how the different buildings are coming together in the spaces that are created. So this, I think, will help to frame our discussions moving forward. Again, a lot of this is placeholder. This isn't really designed, right? Like, this isn't even different pavers or anything at this point. It's just showing the delineation of the furnishing zone and the curb. But I think it does give you a sense of what the campus is beginning to look like. This is looking across. Here's the stockyards area. So there is this portion of the stockyards that will be permanent pens. That's where the bison pens will be. And so we're looking at using some of the existing brick, using some of the wood in that. But these will be permanent pens along the rail line. Here's the pedestrian bridge coming over. The Stockyards Event Center, we think will actually be a really great community programmable space. And then I think what you're asking about is, the rest of that area. So it's probably 15 acres, right, that is just kind of open, and when it's not stock show, it doesn't have these pens set up. So a small portion of that will be used to store the pens, because remember we're using these rock bottoms with a big concrete base, and then the penning material can go in that. So they need to be stored somewhere, so that'll be on the edge here. But that still leaves an awfully large area to be used otherwise. So again, I think parking sometimes, but then obviously events. So looking at concerts, looking at art shows, looking at car shows, boat shows, a lot of different things. And I don't have the power to say exactly what that's going to be, but the authority it'll be in their best interest to program that as much as possible.
Are the pens, is the way the pens are set up and the use of the land, is that the state of the art, or is there some other way that, that's $80 million worth of ground at 20 acres, and it just seems to use it for 20 days. There needs to be more of a plan to figure out how to better use it and get more value from it.
So Mickey, those pins are state-of-the-art, the latest technology, so that we don't have to drill down into the ground like we have here out in the yards. These are just rock bottoms that you pick up with a forklift and move out when you're done. So you have a complete, whether that's concrete, whether it's asphalt, we don't know yet, but whatever the surface is going to be completely free and bookable. And the authority will have a tremendous opportunity to book outdoor festivals, farmers markets, as Jay was pointing out. But you got to also remember we're going to be booking the leading horse shows in the world. And when you book a leading horse show, okay, in that equestrian center that Jay's pointing to, they're going to come with 10,000 people, 3,000 horses for 3 weeks in your city and spend about $35 million. They got to have a place to park and put their trailers. And so that's going to have to be used for the major horse shows that are going to be coming to this facility as well. maybe we only get 3 major ones a year, which would be a home run, and the rest of them are probably, you know, the same 200 to 400 horse shows that we're doing today. So they won't encapsulate the entire yards, but the authority has a tremendous opportunity in this events pavilion that's sitting next to the equestrian center and livestock center.
Yeah, I would say, so the state of the art was actually tackled in the master plan, honestly, in making this a flexible space. Because if we were to do permanent pens, it would only be used 16 days out of the year, or maybe, I don't know, maybe 50, right? Like for other livestock events and things. But we are setting up with electric, with water, and gridding that in a way that it can be used for multiple types of events. And so that is a big attraction. There's very few outdoor spaces that will have the same sort of utility infrastructure and with a flush surface as the yards will have. So that is, I think, a very positive thing.
Ann?
Hey Jay, just a real quick question. So if you go back to the rendering of Betty Cram Drive, that one,
yeah,
there's a parking lot right on Betty Cram Drive right there?
Yeah.
Really?
No.
Let me just say, this is not architecture.
I know it's not architecture.
And it's a placeholder.
That as an issue.
But I'm just noting it.
Right.
Can I address that because it's come up? So just to address this, we have already, this was a very early, this isn't what they're going to build.
This is from the programming study that CSU did.
They had
for animal health.
initially talked about that parking lot up front. They have moved it to the back.
Okay, yay, thank you.
Yeah.
So it definitely is not
You'll
going to be
notice
up
we
in
did
the
not
front.
accommodate any access to that.
And honestly, one of the people that flagged that and helped make that change was Brad Buchanan.
Well, there's a reason, because they're telling all of us we can't do that.
Any questions? Mickey, did you have a follow-up? Okay.
This one helps to show the scale of the yards. I think we're all set. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, right, Gretchen?
Yeah, anything else?
We're done? We're done? Okay. Just, anybody, you don't want to go, well, the only other thing we have to do is, you did mention in your overall report, is, and you guys all filled out dates, but we do have to have a special working session on the RFQ, I'm sorry, the language for the RFQ that will ultimately go out this fall for the Triangle. So hopefully, since you guys have filled out those dates, I know we have to do some additional work for placemaking, but we also need to have a working session for the RFQ, correct?
Yeah, and I would like to plan, if you're open to it, for 2 sessions in October. We're going to use September we're developing some content. We've got a team out there looking at specifications with Paul on, what should an arena look like? How should it function? How do you use it for stock show and other events? So we are, and I'm working with the Office of Economic Development on some other draft language that puts this site in the context of housing in North Denver. So I'd like to use September to start to pull some of this material together, have at least 2 sessions with you all in October so that we have a little bit of iteration. And then we are planning for the end of November to release the request for qualifications. So keep in mind that's not an RFP. This is going to be multiple phases. You would not see a request for proposals until the first quarter, likely, of 2019. So we'll have more time to develop, but I think it's really important that we understand where we want to get to, even when you put out the request for qualifications, so that the language is consistent throughout this process. So we're just well in front of it, but I'd ask for times in October.
Mickey?
In the mail, you indicated that there would be a report on the meeting you had last night. And is there any other information?
What was last night?
The meeting, maybe it wasn't last night. Did you have a meeting on the Triangle, on the development? I thought there was an special meeting. Okay.
There was a special meeting that Jay reported out on last week that we had here, but it was all lot of
placemaking.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't done anything. We're still getting it together.
Okay. The other question: is it possible, as you put together this graphics on where the center is, that you include really the neighborhoods, so we can see how they're related. We look here and just see basically this site, but it would be really helpful, and I think what David indicated is you don't necessarily, it's great to take a tour, but it would be nice to see all of it on a map, what's close and where we're trying to go.
Everything fits together.
Yeah, that's a great comment. We've done that on our overviews of how people move to and through the site. I think particularly, and I'll ask Jay and Eric, when we look at the river open space, that we need to show both sides of the river to show the context. So we will just, as you see it, we'll keep making those changes. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that? So AE's got a announcement.
I have a quick announcement and one introduction. Albus wasn't able to stay and wanted us all to be reminded that September 4th at 5:30 is at Focus Points is a meeting of what will be the advisory committee for the sound and noise monitoring, etc., near the construction site there. So if people could please show up, and if you know anybody between East 45th or East 44th and East 47th Avenue between Brighton and Vasquez, please especially invite them to come because that's a heavy impact area. So, but I also wanted to introduce Marisa Volpe, and she's the Director of Community Outreach with Colorado History, one of the founding MOU partners of the National Western Center that is going to be a vital part of bringing forward things from within the neighborhoods that need to resonate as part of the history and visibility. And there's some good conversations going on, and I really am tickled and happy, and thank you for sticking the meeting out, and I'm glad, and I wanted to just give her a chance to say hi and for people to make sure to make a connection to enrich this.
Thank you. I am Marisa. I'm with History Colorado. As you know, we are just beginning some conversations in the neighborhoods to hear stories, just to listen to the lived experiences of community members. So what we are planning is just a few outreach events. We'll be with our friends with DMNS and obviously CSU, but what we'll be doing is we'll be gathering in community centers, churches, just to listen, just to bring together folks, to share memories, hopefully to build connection and resilience. So if you have any other questions, you can ask me. Thank you.
Thank you, A. Thank you. Oh, you did. Okay, anything else? By the way, we do have NDCC on the agenda. Tim Sandoz couldn't make it tonight. He just texted me. So we will pick that up in the next month as to what is all going on in the NDCC. Anything else? Any other comments? Anybody, any poor public wants to go home? Anybody's got any comments to do it? If not, we're adjourned.